My name is Elowen Hart, 28 years old. I was on the floor of my apartment, knees pressing into a faded rug that smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and old coffee, with my laptop open and two tabs battling for my pulse. Job listings on the left, a spreadsheet of bills on the right. The fridge hummed like a tired animal. Outside, twilight bled purple at the edges of the blinds. I had $23 and some coins in a tall jar I once called Paris. Cute, right? This month, my savings were gone. My hours had been cut. I was behind on a bill I hadn't mentioned to my parents because I knew exactly what they'd say. Why don't you ask Jake? He's great with money. Then my phone buzzed. A photo from Jake. At first glance, I thought it was a joke. He'd written on actual printer paper with thick, shark-toothed Sharpie, Jake's graduation wish list. Bullet points, underlines, prices like stock tickers, Rolex Submariner, $6,000, 2-week European vacation, Italy preferred, France or Spain acceptable, $5,000 down payment on a quality car, MacBook Pro, highest model, non-negotiable, AirPods Max. Something sentimental from each family member, but not corny or cheap. And finally, no gift cards unless over 500. I pinched to zoom, hoping the punchline would appear in the pixels. It didn't. The family group chat, which I keep muted so I can breathe, lit up like a slot machine. Mom's heart emojis tumbled in first. Aunt Carla asked what week the Europe trip was planned for so she could contribute miles. Dad sent his signature thumbs up, the digital equivalent of a shrug. No one said a word about how tone-deaf the list was. No one blinked. The same old choreography. The golden child tosses a demand in the air, and the family builds a trampoline underneath it. I stared until the numbers blurred and became something else. Groceries, rent, the bus pass that kept me dry under electric rain. The longer I looked, the heavier I felt, like the paper itself had weight. I learned early on that in our house, Jake's wants weren't suggestions. They were expectations, and if you didn't meet them, you were the problem. So I texted him directly. Keep dreaming, Jake. Not even a minute later, then don't bother showing up. My screen went cold. I set the phone down face first, as if the message might leak into the room. Somewhere in the building, a dog barked, a door slammed, a couple laughed the kind of laugh that makes you hate happiness. I sat there and thought about whether there was any other way to read those words. There wasn't. He meant them. And everyone else, my parents, my aunt, the cousins who loved a party more than a person, seemed too busy lining up their contributions to notice that the one person who couldn't afford socks that month had been effectively disinvited from her own brother's graduation. I decided to stay home. At the time, it felt like the high road, like choosing not to be the sour note in his victory march. Let them enjoy the fantasy. Let Jake have his luxury haul. I'd spare myself the humiliation of watching the family trip over themselves to hand a 22-year-old a Rolex while I clipped digital coupons to buy frozen vegetables. I told myself that if I stepped back, maybe the heat would lower. That's the lie people like me tell ourselves. We control the fire by refusing to add oxygen. The truth is, sometimes the fire is the point. The phone buzzed again. A new message. Not in the group chat. Brianna. We weren't close. Growing up, she was the cousin with blunt edges, the girl who turned truth into a sport and sarcasm into a second language. She'd moved to Seattle to work for some tech company I couldn't pronounce, the kind with an open office plan and kombucha on tap. For years, I only saw her in filtered squares, hiking trails, laptop stickers, crooked grins. She was also one of the few who never genuflected to Jake. She'd seen him eat entire holidays for sport and call it charm. You going tomorrow? She typed. Or avoiding the circus? I replied, avoiding. Consider me officially uninvited. From who? I sent the screenshot, the list, the line, the casual cruelty. Unbelievable, she wrote. Then, after a single typing bubble that felt like a heartbeat, actually, totally believable. Don't do anything, I added quickly, already hearing the edge in her voice. Wasn't planning to, she said, but I'm going. Not for him, for you. I stared at that last sentence like it might grow teeth. Brianna didn't do for you. She did for the truth. Maybe those were the same thing, and I'd been confusing them. I made tea and watched the kettle refuse to boil. Every small noise felt amplified, the click of the stovetop, the whisper of the draft beneath the door, the chime of another family text, Aunt Carla asking if anyone knew whether the luxury watch store on Main had a graduation discount, Dad sending a link to a dealership with reasonable lease options, Mom dropping a string of celebratory gifts that looped forever. I closed my eyes and pictured Jake opening the Rolex, how he'd grin like a toothpaste model, how he'd clap the back of Dad's shoulder as if Dad had earned the degree himself, how he'd say something about finally getting the tools he deserves, and how everyone would laugh like relief. I imagined myself in that tent swallowing air, swallowing words, swallowing myself. I put the kettle back on the cold burner. There are moments you can't name that still turn a life. Mine had freckles. The day Grandma folded a letter into my palm at 13 and said, "Some gifts arrive when you're most yourself," and the way Jake, even at 6, needed the loudest laugh to feel real. We were built in the same house with different blueprints. Grandma used to say that one. "You measure a family by the ones who do the dishes after," she'd add, handing me a towel. It sounded quaint back then, the kind of homespun wisdom embroidered on pillows. Now, with a graduation registry reading like a corporate grant proposal in my texts, it felt like instructions. Another ping. My mother, privately this time. "He's just excited, honey. Big moments make him extra." "Extra what?" I typed, then deleted it. I wrote, "I'm happy for him, because that was the required offering, the coin at the toll booth." "You'll come," she sent. Not a question. "I can't afford it," I typed. I deleted that too. "Maybe next time." "Okay," she replied, after a pause that felt like judgment scrolling by slowly. A heart emoji. The digital bandage. As the evening deepened, I did what I always do when I can't fix the story. I organized small things. I sorted the pantry and tape-labeled jars of beans. I aligned the shoes at the door, like obedient soldiers. I ironed the one blouse that makes me feel like I'm not losing. At some point, I fell asleep on the couch with the blinds still open, the streetlight carving a bright scar across the ceiling. Morning came pink and indifferent. I made toast and couldn't taste it. The phone stayed quiet for an hour, then 2. I pictured the campus quad dressed up in folding chairs and optimism, the balloon arch squeaking in the breeze, the way my mother would position herself for photos like a queen arranging her train. I pictured Brianna in a simple dress and dark sunglasses, watching like a referee who'd finally been invited onto the field. I pictured the Rolex box making a light, scratchy sound as it slid across a table. It's funny how silence can feel crowded when you know the world is loud elsewhere. I turned my phone face down again. I tried to work on my resume and changed a verb 4 times. I deleted it all and started again. I opened my email inbox and moved messages into folders like sorcery. The day oozed by. At 3, a text from Brianna. A single line. "You were right to stay home." My mouth went dry. What happened? "Tell you after," she typed. Then, "Also, I took half the cookies from the dessert table. Sorry, not sorry." I pictured her palm, quick as a thief, moving through sugar like a decision. I smiled for the first time all day. It didn't last. A new text crashed through from Dad. "Call when free." Another from Mom. "We need to talk." The group chat chimed with a cousin's broken sentence. That was, wow. And then, like a ghost dragging a chain, a message from Jake. I didn't open it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear whatever version of sorry he sold to himself. I went to the sink and ran water until it was too hot. Steam lifted like a blessing. I thought about the night last year when Grandma's neighbor brought over a box of her things, old recipe cards, an opera program, a small stack of envelopes with names written in her careful, slanted hand. For graduations, the neighbor had said. She was saving them. We never found one addressed to Jake. Maybe she was waiting for the right moment to write it. Maybe she had, and we misplaced it between casseroles and condolences. Or maybe, this thought arrived like a shiver. Maybe she asked someone else to deliver it when he was truly himself. The doorbell startled me. No one was there, just the echo of a hallway and the smell of someone else's dinner. I pressed my palms to the cool wood and let the apartment hold me up. The phone vibrated again. "Mom, we're coming by tomorrow. Please pick up." I turned the phone over and saw the preview of Jake's message. Just the first few words. "Didn't mean to." I locked the screen before it could be the same old script. I didn't show up to my brother's graduation, but someone else did. Someone who knew exactly what he had done to me and wasn't going to let it slide. By nightfall, even my parents, yes, even my father, the man who turns any criticism into logistics, were texting me apologies, embarrassed. They finally saw him for who he really was. Not because I said anything, because the right person said it at the right time, with a kind of calm that makes lies trip over themselves. I sat on the rug until my knees ached and the room went blue. The fridge hummed. The jar of coins on the counter caught a sliver of light and glowed like it had a plan. I didn't know the details yet, only the shape of them. A tent, a watch, a sentence spoken loud enough to puncture a family myth. A truth arriving dressed as a gift. And later, an envelope that would change the temperature of an entire room. I lifted my phone and typed to Brianna, "Thank you for going." Her reply came back fast. "Don't thank me yet." "Should I be worried?" I asked. "Depends," she wrote. "How much do you like the sound of a spell breaking?" I thought of Grandma's old letters and the way she timed her words like prayers. Maybe some spells need witnesses to shatter. Maybe some gifts aren't things you hold, but moments you survive. My phone buzzed again, a final tremor before the night set. I didn't open it. I let the screen go dark and listened to my breath settle, steady and ordinary, like the kind of life I wanted, one where I didn't have to disappear so someone else could shine. Tomorrow, I'd learn exactly what cracked and who picked up the pieces. Tonight, I let the silence answer for me. The morning after Jake's graduation, the apartment felt too quiet, like the walls were waiting for me to ask what I'd missed. The phone had buzzed itself into exhaustion overnight. Group chat fireworks, Mom's insistent, "We need to talk," Dad's clipped, "Call when free," and that unopened message from Jake. I ignored them all. I brewed coffee strong enough to feel like penance and waited for the world to confess itself. It came in the form of a call from Aunt Carla. She never called me. She was the family's designated event planner, too busy color-coding holiday menus to reach out without an agenda. When her name flashed on my screen, I almost let it ring out. Something told me this was different. "Elowin," she said, voice pitched an octave higher than usual, "you won't believe what your cousin did." My stomach turned cold. "Brianna? Oh, honey, she didn't just make a scene. She detonated the whole party." I gripped the phone tighter, trying to read between Carla's words. "She stood up right after your father gave Jake that envelope for the car down payment. And when someone handed him the Rolex box, God, Elowin, a $6,000 watch, Brianna just stepped forward, cool as you like, and said..." Carla paused for drama. "Did you already get your $6,000 watch? Or is there still time to ask Santa?" For a second, I could see it as if I'd been there. The tent balloon spelling Jake 2025, the crowd synchronized clapping, and then silence slicing through like glass. "What did Jake do?" I asked. "He looked like he swallowed a lemon." Your mother tried to laugh it off, but Brianna didn't stop. She pulled out her phone, held it up for everyone, and said, "You sent this to Elowin, right? This list? You demanded these gifts and told her not to bother showing up when she said she couldn't afford it." My pulse skittered. "She showed them the screenshot?" "Oh, she did," Carla said, half scandalized, half thrilled. He tried to say it was a joke, banter, whatever, but Brianna cut him off. "So telling your sister, who's broke, that she's not welcome, that's just casual banter?" The whole tent froze. No one spoke. Your father looked like he wanted to crawl under a chair, and then your mother, well, she finally lost it. Not at Brianna, at Jake. Carla's voice softened, like she was afraid the words might burn. She pulled him aside. Heated conversation. Whisper yelling near the edge of the tent. Your dad tried to smooth it over, but even he couldn't excuse it this time. Some folks left early. Honestly, Elowin, it was the most uncomfortable party I've ever attended. I pressed the heel of my hand to my eye. For years, I'd been waiting for the day my parents saw Jake the way I did, and now that it had come, it felt like standing in the wreckage of a building I'd prayed would collapse. By evening, the apologies came. Dad's voicemail, voice gravelly and halting. "We didn't see it. I didn't see it. I'm sorry." Mom's text. "You were right about everything. Please come to dinner." Even Jake's name appeared in my inbox. A message unopened, lurking like a snake under a porch. But Brianna, her text landed sharp and simple. "You're welcome. Also, I stole half the cookies from the dessert table. Sorry, not sorry." I laughed, a raw sound that cracked open something in me. Later that night, the phone buzzed again. Brianna this time, calling. I answered on the second ring. Thought you should hear it from me, not filtered through Carla's pearl clutching, she said. Your brother's face when I read that list aloud. You could have bottled it and sold it as pesticide. I winced. I told you not to do anything. Yeah, well, I don't follow orders. Besides, you needed someone in that room who wasn't hypnotized by his charm. Silence stretched, thick with gratitude I didn't know how to say. You okay? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. It's like I wanted them to see. But now that they have, I feel exposed. Like my pain's just family gossip. Brianna's voice softened, rare for her. It's not gossip if it's truth. You've been carrying this alone for too long. Consider this a redistribution of weight. I swallowed hard. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. This isn't over. Trust me. After we hung up, I sat in the dim light, staring at the unopened message from Jake. I imagined what it said. Excuses dressed as apologies. Lines like, let's move past this, or didn't mean to upset you. Words designed to lubricate, not heal. My thumb hovered over the notification, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not yet. Because here's the thing about Jake, he never really lost. Even when he was scolded, he twisted the moment into proof of how important he was. And I knew, deep down, that until I stood in the same room with him and spoke my truth, nothing would change. 2 days later, my mom called again, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard. Dinner. Just you, me, and Dad. No Jake. I almost said no, but something in her tone, less command, more plea, made me pause. So I went. Their dining room looked wrong that night. No TV humming in the background. No half-empty beer bottle by Dad's elbow. Just a pitcher of water, a plate of takeout they were trying to pass as Mom's cooking, and silence pressing down on us like heavy curtains. Dad was the one who spoke first. His hands folded awkwardly on the table, he said, We treated Jake like the son. Everything revolved around him, even you. The words stunned me. Dad had always been the mediator, the excuse maker, the man who turned Jake's tantrums into logistics. Now he was admitting what I'd known all along. Mom's eyes were wet. We thought you just needed space when you stopped coming around. We didn't realize space meant you didn't feel safe here anymore. And then she asked, voice breaking, What do you want, Elowen? Not what Jake needs, not what will smooth things over. What do you want? For the first time in my life, they weren't asking me to disappear for harmony. They were asking me to exist. I set my fork down and took a breath. I want accountability. I want Jake to hear what he did. From me, in front of everyone. I don't need him to apologize publicly, but I need the pretending to stop. I need everyone to know he isn't flawless, that I'm not just bitter or jealous, I'm human, and I've been hurt. They exchanged a glance, then nodded. Not in the perfunctory, sure, honey way, but like they finally understood the weight I'd been carrying. Dad cleared his throat. Uncle George's birthday is next weekend. Everyone will be here. Jake, too. Say what you need to say. We won't interfere. I nodded slowly, my heart pounding. Okay. That night, lying awake in my childhood bed, I replayed every holiday Jake had stolen, every birthday he'd overshadowed, every time my silence had been mistaken for consent. I knew one thing. When the family gathered again, I wouldn't stay quiet. Because silence had protected Jake long enough. And this time, I was ready to break the spell myself. The day of Uncle George's birthday, the house smelled of overdone garlic bread and too sweet frosting, the kind of scent that clung to curtains long after guests left. I arrived early, nerves sharp as glass under my skin. Mom hugged me like she was afraid I might vanish. Dad gave a stiff pat on my shoulder, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen. The living room was dressed in plastic tablecloths and cheap balloons, our family's usual attempt at festivity. But beneath it, the air buzzed with something heavier, anticipation, maybe, or dread. I sat at the long dining table, watching as relatives trickled in, laughter bouncing against the walls in the same rhythms I'd grown up with. Only this time, every note sounded slightly off, like a piano a half step out of tune. Jake arrived 20 minutes late, as always. White button-up, sleeves rolled with deliberate care, hair styled like he'd stepped off a commercial. He breezed past me without acknowledgement, high-fived a cousin, and launched into a story about a consulting gig in Miami. The old grin was plastered across his face, but when his eyes flicked over me for half a second, there was something else. Wariness, maybe, or calculation. I hadn't eaten all day. My stomach felt hollow, not from nerves, but from focus. I'd spent the week replaying what I'd say, rehearsing words until they carved grooves in my mind. But sitting there, watching him charm the room, I realized rehearsed lines wouldn't do. This had to be raw. Dinner unfolded in the same uneven rhythm as every family gathering. Overfilled plates, forced jokes, kids shrieking in the hallway. Jake sat at the head of the table like it had been reserved for him by birthright, collecting laughs as if they were currency. He opened gifts, cologne, sleek headphones, another expensive wallet from our parents. Each unwrapping was accompanied by applause, as though the act of being Jake was achievement enough. At some point, Dad rose with his glass, tapping a fork against the rim. "A toast," he announced, smiling in George's direction. The clinking spread around the table. It was my opening. I stood before I could lose the courage, before the rhythm of old habits pulled me back down. "I have something to say," I began. Conversation stopped. Forks hovered midair. Even the children hushed. Jake barely looked up, still chewing. That familiar smirk tugged at his lips. "I didn't go to Jake's graduation," I said. "Not because I was sick or busy or out of town. I stayed home because I was told not to show up by my own brother." A ripple of confusion passed through the room. A few relatives glanced at each other. Others stared into their plates. I kept going. Jake sent me a list, a wish list, like a registry for his graduation, a $6,000 Rolex, a European vacation, a car down payment, and when I said I couldn't afford it, he told me not to bother showing up. Gasps, awkward coughs, the shuffle of chairs. I steadied my voice. "I don't want pity. I just want truth. For years I've been quiet. I've been the one who swallowed pride so he could shine. But silence isn't strength when it's just protecting entitlement. I'm done pretending things are fair. I'm done being the invisible scaffolding for someone else's stage." Finally, I turned to Jake. His fork was down now. He smirked, ready with some deflection. "You've gotten everything you ever asked for," I said, meeting his eyes. "But what you never got was a reality check. So here it is. Your entitlement isn't confidence, it's weakness, dressed up in compliments you didn't earn." The words cracked through the room. Forks clattered onto plates. Even the jazz music in the background seemed to falter. Jake opened his mouth, that old trick of turning shame into humor. But before he could speak, another voice cut through. "Brianna." She rose from the couch in the living room, black dress simple, expression unreadable. In her hand, a plain white envelope. "Almost forgot," she said, walking forward. "Grandma asked me to give this to you at your graduation. Told me to wait until you were really being yourself." The room froze. Jake's eyes flicked to the envelope like it was a weapon. His hands tightened around his beer bottle. He opened it slowly, as though bracing for treasure. Inside, 2 pages of Grandma's familiar cursive. As he read, the bravado bled from his face. First amused, then confused, then utterly blank. No one moved. No one breathed. He folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and without a word, stood up. "Jake," Mom called, voice trembling. He didn't look back. He walked out of the house, the door closing with a soft click that sounded louder than any slam. The silence left behind was suffocating. Relatives stared at one another, waiting for someone to break it. Brianna set the envelope on the table in front of me. She wanted him to hear the truth, she said quietly. Then she added, "Sound familiar?" I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding. I didn't know what Grandma had written, not exactly, but I had a guess. Something honest. Something Jake couldn't laugh off or ignore. Something no Rolex or applause could shield him from. That night, when I got home, a new notification waited. Not a text, a voice memo from Jake. I didn't play it, not yet. Because I knew, whatever it held, nothing in our family would ever be the same again. The voice memo sat in my inbox like a live wire. Every time I opened my phone, the little play button pulsed at me, daring me to press it. I didn't. Not for hours. Instead, I cleaned dishes that were already spotless. I rearranged bookshelves by color, then by height. I ironed a shirt I hadn't worn in 2 years. Anything to avoid hearing Jake's voice in my apartment, a space I had fought so hard to keep mine. Finally, near midnight, with the city hushed and the radiator ticking like a metronome, I pressed play. His voice came through low, uncertain, almost like he didn't know how to begin. "I didn't expect Brianna to show up," he said. "When she stood there, reading that list in front of everyone, I wanted the ground to open up. Not because I was embarrassed. God knows I've survived embarrassment before. But because it was the first time someone didn't let me talk my way out of it." A pause. I could hear him exhale, the shaky kind that betrayed how hard he was trying to sound calm. The letter from Grandma, it wasn't angry, it wasn't cruel. That made it worse. She said she'd watched me grow up thinking I was special, not because of who I was, but because of what everyone gave me. That I learned to see love as gifts, as praise, as attention, not as patience, or sacrifice, or showing up. She reminded me I didn't even go to her memorial. His voice cracked on the word. She wrote about when we were kids. You fell off your bike in her driveway. You didn't cry. I did. Because you got attention, and I didn't. She said even then she saw it, the hunger to be the most. She told me the Rolex wouldn't fix that. That applause doesn't mean you've earned it. It just means people are tired of the silence. And then she ended with, she ended with this. You don't need more. You need to need less of what you never earned. I closed my eyes. I could picture Grandma's careful cursive, the way she underlined words with the soft pressure of a fountain pen. Jake's voice steadied, almost hollow. When you stood up at that table, I thought I'd brush it off like I always do, make a joke, distract the room, wait for someone else to move on. But you didn't flinch. And then the room went quiet. I've never heard that kind of quiet before. It was like the spell broke. Another pause. I know I've steamrolled everyone, but you... He stumbled, then forced himself to keep going. You never said anything, so I assumed you were fine. Turns out you were just done. The memo ended there. No apology, no promises, no tidy bow, just silence. I sat frozen, the glow of the phone screen painting my face pale. For once, he hadn't tried to charm his way out. He had simply admitted. The next day, Mom called. He wants to talk, she said softly, face to face. I almost refused. I was so tired of his theatrics, his half-hearted attempts to reset the board without ever changing the game. But then she added, he didn't bring the watch home. He left it behind. That gave me pause. So I went. When I arrived at my parents' house, Jake was already there. No smug grin, no performance. He stood when I entered, but didn't come toward me. Just nodded like a soldier waiting for orders. On the table in front of him sat a folded sheet of paper. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Grandma's. He pushed it toward me. She wrote one for you, too. My hand shook as I unfolded it. Elowen, it began, you have been quiet for so long, I worry you think silence is the same as strength. It isn't. True strength is standing your ground, even when no one claps for you. I admire how you never made noise just to be noticed, but I fear you've carried pain that wasn't yours to carry. Forgiveness is not a gift to him. It is a gift to you. Choose peace, not because he deserves it, but because you do. Tears blurred the ink. I looked at Jake. His eyes were rimmed red, but he didn't wipe them. He didn't even try to disguise them. Are you actually ready to change? I asked, my voice steady. Or are you just sorry because you got caught? He swallowed. I don't know, but I want to learn the difference. I stared at him for a long time. For once there was no smirk, no bravado, no armor. Just my brother, raw, uncertain, and stripped of the applause he'd lived on. I didn't answer, not then. I folded Grandma's letter, placed it back on the table, and stood. I need time, I said. He nodded. I understand. No guilt trip, no plea, just silence. And for the first time in years, I believed him. Days passed. A week. Jake didn't text. He didn't call. No sarcastic one-liners. No just checking in. No attempts to wriggle back into the spotlight. Just absence. And oddly, that absence said more than anything he could have spoken. Then, one morning, while I was drafting yet another job application at my kitchen table, an email arrived. No subject line, just one sentence in the body. I know it doesn't make things right, but it's a start. Attached was a PDF, a payment receipt, proof that he had covered my overdue rent, down to the last cent. I stared at the screen, emotions colliding. Relief, anger, gratitude, discomfort, because Jake never gave without strings. He never helped without demanding applause. But this time, no note asking for recognition, no follow-up demand, just the gesture. Later that night, he showed up at my door. No warning, just a knock. I opened it to find him standing there empty-handed. No gifts, no props, no smile rehearsed in a mirror. Can I talk? He asked. I stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the couch like it might reject him. I started therapy, he said quickly, as though ripping off a bandage. Brianna helped me find someone. I went in thinking they'd tell me I was just misunderstood. Instead, they tore me apart in the first 10 minutes. Said I confuse attention with affection. that I've been addicted to applause since I was a kid. His laugh was bitter. They're not wrong. I watched him, waiting for the catch. But there wasn't one. And the watch, he continued. I sold it. Couldn't stand the thought of wearing something that symbolized everything wrong with me. Used part of the money to pay off a debt I'd been hiding. Donated the rest to a nonprofit that covers graduation fees for kids who can't afford them. That one hit me. Jake didn't donate. Jake collected. Always. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said finally. I just want to start building something that won't make you wish I wasn't your brother. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even polished. But it was honest. And for the first time, that felt like enough. 6 months later, the air in our family felt different. Not perfect, not healed, but lighter, as if a weight none of us admitted to carrying had finally been set down. I'd kept my guard up, waiting for Jake to backslide, waiting for the apologies to shrink into performances, the promises to deflate into old habits. But time, those long, boring days that really test change, proved me wrong in ways I hadn't expected. Jake stayed quiet at first. Not cold, not sulking, just quiet. For the first time in his life, he wasn't filling every room with his voice. When he did speak, he asked questions instead of delivering monologues. Once, during a brunch at Mom's, he cut himself off mid-story to ask me how my job search was going. It was such a small moment, but it stuck. My parents shifted too, in their own clumsy way. Mom started sending me short texts. No emojis, no exclamation marks, just, "Good morning, thinking of you," or a photo of the soup she'd made with, "How's yours turning out?" She'd never asked me about my life in that way before. Dad wasn't suddenly sentimental, but he remembered my birthday without Mom's reminders. He even called the night before just to say he wanted to beat everyone else to it. For my father, that was seismic. Then came the biggest surprise. Jake called on a Tuesday afternoon. No agenda, no drama in his voice, just, "Hey, I'm near your place. Want to grab lunch?" My first instinct was suspicion. Old scars don't vanish overnight. But something about his tone disarmed me, so I said yes. We met at a quiet diner downtown, the kind with vinyl booths and chipped coffee cups. He showed up early, another first. We ordered pancakes and eggs, simple food that didn't try to impress anyone. Halfway through, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were college applications. "I'm going back," he said, eyes steady. "Nonprofit management. Local community college for now." I blinked. "You're serious?" He nodded. "I want to work with youth programs. Kids who don't have the kind of safety net I grew up with." He laughed bitterly. "The safety net you never got." I didn't know what to say. For once, words felt smaller than the moment. "I'm not trying to fix everything," he added quickly, "but I can't go back to who I was, and I don't want to." I studied him. He looked older somehow, stripped of the shine he used to polish himself with. There was no Rolex on his wrist, no designer cologne in the air, just Jake, raw and human. "What changed?" I asked. His answer was simple, almost quiet. "You stopped letting it slide. You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You just walked away, and I finally saw what it felt like to be the one left behind." That hit me harder than I expected. Later that night, Mom texted me. "Jake told us about school. We're proud of him, but more than that, we're proud of you. You held the mirror up. You didn't break it. You made us all look." I saved that message, not because I needed their pride, but because it was the first time they acknowledged the years I'd been invisible. Weeks rolled on. The changes held. Jake showed up to family dinners and, for once, didn't dominate the room. He helped Mom clear dishes without being asked. He listened when Dad talked instead of interrupting with a bigger story. At one dinner, Dad raised his glass, not to Jake, not to a holiday or a new car, but to me. "To Elowen," he said, "for standing up when we didn't, for making this family stronger than it's ever been." I froze, glass midair. Jake clinked his glass against mine and added, "To my sister, who finally called me out, and thank God she did." There was no sarcasm in his voice, just peace. Quiet, fragile peace. In that moment, I realized something. Boundaries don't just change how people see you. They change the entire balance of a room. They force the truth out of hiding. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they give everyone else the space to finally grow up. We're not perfect now. We never will be. But we're honest. We're real. And for the first time in years, I'm not just in the family. I'm part of it. As for me, I've started to change too. I'm still tight on money, but my hours picked up. I'm considering going back to school myself. Something small, something for me. I've started saying no more often, and it doesn't feel like war anymore. It feels like freedom. Jake is still learning, still stumbling, but he's different. No Rolex, no spotlights, no applause. Just effort, just eye contact. And after everything, that's worth more than anything he ever asked for.